Welcome, data enthusiasts. I'm Joseph from Zuma, and this is our podcast, Data for Good. Here at Zuma, we are a dedicated recruitment company for senior data insights and analytics professionals, connecting you with Berlin's most influential and innovative companies. Today, we're joined by Alla Anashenkova. Alla is head of product management and sales engineering at ThroughPut. ThroughPut offer an optimization platform for the supply chain industry, helping businesses to optimize their supply chain process anywhere where products are made or moved. That's my short overview. Alla, perhaps you're correct, but in any case, how's it going today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad we're over the Halloween craziness, and happy to be here today.
That's probably a funny topic for another time, but yeah, also happy for it to be over. We're deep into autumn over here in Europe. I understand that you're over in the States right now. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm based in California, usually sunny, but today it's quite rainy, which is good for us.
Yeah, of course. Yes, it would be. And today, I understand you will be talking to us about big data for the supply chain world, specifically for the optimization of supply chain processes. And this is good for us because we've, over the last 2 to 3 months, with lots of data leaders across Berlin and Germany, we've been talking about a range of data topics, but not big data, and then not your niche area of supply chain. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Me too.
Good. And before we get into that, let's wind back the years. Let's go back in time, as we do with all our guests. It would be good to know from you what your first touch points were with data and the power of data. How did you first discover the power of data analytics?
Sure. Well, going back in time, I think throughout my career, I have really focused on, or have been always passionate about supply chain and operations problem statement, and it doesn't get old over a decade of focusing on that. And throughout my career, I had been exposed to big data, starting from my first job at Walmart.com. So it's a e-commerce retail business.
Never heard of it.
And then my first role was in supply chain analytics. There I've been able to tap into, a lot of inventory moves or logistics optimization of the last mile questions. And that really necessitated for me to understand what are the data structures, how much data I can process, and what kind of questions can I ask from the supply chain data sets to extract value and connect it to something that will result in improvement for the operation. So that really led me to focus on two more areas, which is analytics and the use of software development to scale the impact of kind of optimizing or solving for supply chain and operations issues.
Fantastic. Walmart, I can see now how you would be heavily involved in big data. Walmart being, I believe, the largest retailer in the world. I don't know if that's still the case with Amazon, but back when I was doing my theses in internationalization, Walmart followed by Tesco were the largest retailers. So no doubt you've touched upon big data, not just data sets, but big data from a very, very early stage. And then with the touch points of supply chain, of course, even more complex. Awesome. Tell me about your, you mentioned about the last mile questions. What can you be a bit more specific there?
Well, so the job was really to take the all the packages or rather all the orders that the end consumer would be placing on the website, and leverage the supply chain of Walmart in terms of their dropship vendors. Those are people who maintain inventory for you instead of you bringing it to your own Walmart, in that case, or warehouses. And so you kind of have a mash of understanding where that inventory is, where it's where you can tap into it, and also where your customers are, and try to link more effectively that consolidation of the order for you as the consumer, making sure that it's delivered within the expected time frame, and under the cost that we have highlighted, right? So that you're not really overspending on that logistics aspect. Yeah, so it was very interesting problem to solve for, because it's not only that you have to meet the customer expectations, you have to optimize the entire supply chain from that warehouse to the customer. And we even expanded it to leverage store inventory at that time, which is more and more common nowadays concept. But it was very new at the time that I've been I've been there at Walmart.com to leverage new delivery locations, which are maybe not your home or office, right? But maybe cell, right? A delivery cell at the UPS where you can deliver to and or pick up at the store as an alternative. So lots of new options to consider, right? But which one do you pick? Which one do you offer to the customer? Which one is appropriate to the customer? All of that was driven through understanding, creating logic that can automatically sort of detect that availability and options and what is most efficient way to leverage your ecosystem.
So very interesting.
That was the start of my, exposure to sort of big data and supply chain. But then as the next step, I've moved to Tesla.
I saw that. Yeah.
And that took a little bit different dive into supply chain and operations topic, because I reverted. I switched the focus from the outbound logistics to inbound logistics at first.
Is that production and assembly of the vehicles?
It's a bit before that. So basically, to construct a car, you need parts for it. Some of them you probably produce by yourself, and some of them you procure from somewhere else, right? And so optimizing the flow of all the parts going to the factory in order to then build the car with them was my first job. That was also very interesting because we sort of started without having much structure or systems in place, and part of the job
startup fashion.
Yeah, it was very startup-y, although I joined when there was 1,500 people. So doesn't look like a startup anymore, but it was I think still has Tesla has a startup feeling in its core, no matter the size of the operation and number of employees. But yeah, so that was interesting. We had to build the systems to capture the data, to orchestrate the processes, along with creating the plans to run the operation at the same time. So it was a double challenge in a way.
Well, your time at Tesla, you'll know that Germany is one of the largest car producers, or at least brand holders in the world. Were any of the practices and principles of supply chain that are used in Germany used at Tesla, or did the CEO of Tesla want to do everything new and completely different and pioneering?
I think it's a combination of things. So in terms of hiring, the talent is very much from different industries. So at different times we've drawn different people from, some from automotive and very traditional environments, and some, like engineering talent and design specialists and so forth, and some from very techy environments where the kind of learning for automotive driving would be applied. And so I think the talent pool that was brought to Tesla, first of all, is very passionate group of people, but also very talented and diverse in their experiences. So it allowed the company to really create that competitive advantage for itself.
Yeah, that certainly is the case still to this day. Okay, we could spend a whole hour talking about that topic alone, I feel.
Yeah.
But
It's been almost 8 years at Tesla, so I have lots of stories about that time for sure.
Okay. For another time, for sure. We're here today to talk about big data and its use in supply chain, which is also the domain that you currently sit in terms of supply chain optimization. Simply put, by me, perhaps not by you, but simply put, how is big data commonly used in the supply chain process or in supply chain management generally?
Well, as businesses grow, they start investing in a lot of transactional systems to help them orchestrate the different processes. Whether you're purchasing something, you need to connect to your supplier, get responses for what they have, whether they can deliver on time and so forth to you, right? And then you have to connect it to all the downstream processes off of that, whether it's production, delivery to your end customer. So there is a lot of opportunity to tap into that stream of activity sort of data. But also there are so many tools that are aid to do things better, right? So you can deploy collection of data about your market, for example, right? How is your customer responding to your promotion strategies? Or what are the things that are impacting your business from external influencing factors and so forth, and analyze the market impact on your business and your planning, right? And also set of tools can be used for modeling a new reality, right? Where you can take in some inputs and then try to create a more optimal scheduling or optimal construct of how your production is set up, right? And simulate whether the result would be better than what you're currently getting. So lots of avenues for data collection, especially on the transactional side, but also lots of gaps still exist. And I think it's really a matter of what's the leverage, what's your competitive advantage for business, to really understand, do I really need to fill that gap right now and invest in
what will I
data?
prioritize on?
Yeah,
okay.
Or is it not really worth the effort?
Yeah, depending on what as you say, the business priorities are. Data collection, masses of data, opportunity to implement A/B testing. That's a hot topic at the moment. External influences.
External influences. Well, I can give you an example from what we do right now at ThroughPut. So not only we try to understand what the operations capabilities are from the transactional data, but also you need to understand what is your demand, how to forecast it, right? Forecasting is a topic of its own, right? But some additional data beyond your actual sales that you're generating can be put to work to better understand whether, for example, price fluctuations of your competitor are impacting how the your customer is reacting to buying or not buying your product, right? Or does the weather impact how your specific set of products sell on the market and so forth? And it could be retail, it could be something like aggregates manufacturing for construction, right? Where when it's raining, not everyone can build during that time, and then not everyone can produce also that aggregates product during the rainy conditions, right? And so you can basically create a regressor, if I can use the technical term, that will tell you how the market responds, that you can learn from that insight. And if you have ability to project that particular data set forward, then you can also generate a much better story for your forecast.
Well, okay. And does that anticipate, you mentioned about rain, and I'm thinking about supply chain and how vehicles move across a country to help build a product, for example, and then you've got to anticipate traffic, car crashes, vehicles needing to stop to refuel, so optimizing. Do you take data points as granular as that as well?
I think this question is more of a on need by basis. So it's important to understand what are the kind of swim lanes, right? So any data is not static, right? So you can't plan around one number. That's just not realistic. But what you need to understand is how big is the fluctuation between what's possible, right? So if I have a rainy day and non-rainy day, but it's kind of like a average precipitation and it's not that heavy, maybe I shouldn't really differentiate between those two days. But if I take into account days that we have rain and it's excessive and it really floods the streets and it really creates bottlenecks on the roads that you can't really, that creates more hazardous driving conditions in a way that really break the chain of events. That's what I would factor in more into correct extracting insights, whether it's meaningful or not, right? So it's good to differentiate what's useful. It's not just pure rain. The excess rain is the metric to go after, right? Or data to go after, and then try to understand whether your hypotheses are correct, right? So take the real data and see if it's actually the assumption that you made is actually showing up the results, the same results in the data. Maybe it's not really meaningful, and you would not try to predict the weather for your business.
Sure. I'm aware that I'm touching some topics that are pretty easy for you and pretty common questions that you ask or that you encounter and overcome in your work consulting and finding solutions for your client. But what are some of the problems that ThroughPut encounter when they work on client projects where you're like, wow, this is new, we've not had to overcome this challenge, or I wonder how we are going to overcome that? Can you think of any, or do any come to mind? So big data problems that come up.
Big data problems. Well, I think it's more of a learning and mindset towards sort of your evolution as digital in the digitization strategy and use of big data strategy the companies deploy. And there is a lot that could be done to make it more reasonable, meaningful approach, into a more reasonable and meaningful approach. a lot of companies get very excited about, oh, I got, for example, I got investment approved into creation of a data lake. Now I can consolidate all my data in one place. Realization that it doesn't happen overnight should be there. And also what you bring into that common place and how you're going to use the data later after you put it in your data lake is very important question to answer, because that's where a lot of companies that I see on board on this journey get a bit confused or overexcited. I've seen examples where people get to prioritize the first phase of implementations on a very granular data sets that they don't even understand yet.
Or maybe they don't even need, or won't know if they'll need that.
Yeah, they don't ask the question whether this is the first priority type of data to bring in. As an example, it could be like, oh, I have an opportunity to put a detailed log of all the events that happen on a certain machine into my data lake. And no one ever saw this data, interpreted it, tried to make sense of it. And so what you end up doing in this situation, for example, is that you put a large data set that needs to be really understood, filtered down, cleaned, interpreted, and then also understood for its use case. What is the use case for this data before you even touched it, right? So you've deployed just now a lot of IT resources, really, right? Infrastructure resources for collecting data that hasn't found its home yet and for future use. So I think in a lot of cases, I try to ask our clients, if they do onboard on a journey, what is the purpose? What is the end goal that you're trying to achieve? Maybe start with something that you have that you're already using and migrate those pieces in and make it more structured and accessible to your teams, right? And then, once you have kind of a good high level understanding of your business and already started extracting value from that project, right? That centralization of data, then what are the additional pieces of information that would be helpful to bring in? So kind of tackling the project from higher level, right, and higher level value, and then layer in more detailed pieces to it.
You mentioned data lakes there as being an emerging use of our data, and it's certainly a hot topic. Do clients come to you and say, "Oh, I've heard about data lakes, and I've heard how data lakes can help us make better use of data"? Do clients see the shiny things and think, "Just implement that for me," without thinking about the long term?
Yes and no. Some are very educated on the topic, so I wouldn't say everyone is confused.
No.
But there's that's one thing that we're trying to at ThroughPut that we're trying to solve for the clients. Not the data lake is going to solve the problem, but really how do you use the data that you already have in a more meaningful way? And it doesn't have to be very granular. That's kind of going back to the example with the rain, segmenting what's meaningful and what's maybe not first priority is very important in that quest. Then sometimes, so the way we work is, for example, we can look at any part of your functional supply chain operation, but really in any project, what we are doing is we can connect to your demand and understand how successful you are at supporting that demand and what is the potential of the actual sales that you're not realizing. And then from that, you can answer the question of where the gaps where you're not meeting demand are potentially coming from. So that really helps you understand what is the next logical piece to look into, whether it's production data or it's logistics or how your suppliers are able to respond to your needs in a timely manner and in a cost-effective way. Those are the questions that you can layer in and bring in more information to understand where your constraints are and how to leverage them better to your advantage.
Interesting. Connect to the business's demand to understand their potential sales. Okay, and that could be at any part of supply chain operation process, be it production, logistics, supply, for example. Generally speaking, how can supply chain be optimized? If you think about throughput and some of the industries or businesses that you work with as case examples, what areas can you effectively optimize? Or what areas do you commonly optimize?
Yeah, it really depends on where your constraint is, right? So identifying where it is for your business, whether it's production that, you can't produce more than a certain amount is limiting what you can sell, right? Or it's maybe your market, and then you have to, the market potential is limited, right? There are only that many number of people that would go after your end product. So then the limitation is treated in a different way because you want to match what you're doing on the production side or supply chain procurement side to that market potential. Or it could be on your supplier side, right? And you need to understand what are the capabilities of your suppliers to deliver, where they're coming from, if logistics is a question, those sort of things.
Interesting. So it really depends on the market potential and the demand of each individual.
For every industry, it's sort of a different focus area. And the market for that industry also can have its own intricacies. So even companies that we work with that have a global presence, they may offer the same number of products to various geographic areas, but then the response from the market in those areas could be completely different. Their production capabilities could be completely different.
Right.
So what we really do is we understand from the data that you have, the transactional data that describes what the functional functional areas of your business are doing on day-to-day basis to support a common goal. And let's say common goal would be for most is to create a more sustainable, profitable business that grows, right? So for that, we take the transactional timestamp data, understand what are the reality, what is the reality, right? What is the level of stability in each part of your supply chain, and how it affects the priorities that you have in supporting products, locations, demand for various products, services, locations, on that granular level.
Even that reality check, that analysis, I can imagine that's quite powerful for companies as well, to understand where they're currently at and on where the gaps are.
Yeah, and it's good to understand what parts of your supply chain are stable, what are not stable. When you know the stability aspect, then you can plan for that stable piece much better, right? You can rely on, let's say, a delivery from your supplier is always within 3 to 5 days. You can plan for that. If you have a different situation where it's not reliable, and sometimes it's between 1 to 3 days, but occasionally it could be 100 days, occasionally it could be 50 days. Those are the situations where deploying the monitoring of stability really helps. because then you understand what outliers mean for your planning and your potential for executing to your plans in the real world, right? Because the plans are usually, you have a plan and then things start moving and you have to readjust, right?
Yeah,
So
like all things in life with plans, right?
how do you pivot from those situations in the more optimal way?
And also how impactful those outliers are on the long term.
Yeah.
Like major events, for example, that are unexpected or unanticipated.
Yeah, in supply chain, a lot of times the disruptions were sort of connected to this is a once in a lifetime type of event like COVID, but we've seen that, and we write off a lot of the later 3 years after pandemic
And many
started.
companies have, right? They've not been able to use the data for that period because it's extraordinary. Are you suggesting that perhaps an event like that does happen more frequently, or at least a similar impact does happen more frequently?
Well, I think what's more important to understand is when something like this happens, to what magnitude it would affect various parts of, let's say, your ecosystem, your business, right? And then what are the recoverable pieces and where you will be stuck, right? Where you don't have plan B, plan C in place to really continue, like with chip shortages, right? A lot of companies felt the pain because they didn't have a second source, third source, or even if they did, those companies were not able to produce to their demand, right? So the dependency created the whole trickle down effect across all the players that depend on this one component.
Yes, it's bizarre that, wasn't it? Was it I'd heard some rumors that one of the Japanese factories, or the foremost Japanese factory that produces chips, burned down or something like this?
I don't know the story. It sounds interesting.
It does. It held up a lot of car manufacturing and car sales across Europe, but whether it can all be down to one manufacturer, I don't know. Okay. What are your thoughts on the current state of big data usage generally? Where are we at, and where can this go?
I think it's the world is the oyster. There is a lot of great potential to leverage the amount of data that we're collecting, and we're trying to connect, right? I think mindful bridges between data sets available is one avenue that I think would make the effort more successful overall.
Sorry, mindful bridges. Talk us through that.
Well, how you can just generate one new data set that might be useful and then leave it at that, right? You have to embed it somewhere else where the value is actually generated, right? So whether that regressor situation that I was talking about that can help you maybe predict the future a little bit better. So how do you bring this data to the place where it's needed in the elegant form, where it's accessible and trustworthy, is sort of a challenge, right? What I've seen is there are a lot of places where you can expand what data you are tapping into for retroactive analysis and insight generation. Like, for example, there are government websites that are just generating and posting data about what's happening in your neighborhood and worldwide and various statistics and stuff. But the limitation of that is there is no one paid to maintain this data set for you, right? And to vet out the quality of it. So even though maybe I can use 3 years of data that someone posted on weather and learn how it impacted a certain business, that's mute because it's not expandable. No one's sitting there and then saying, well, for the next month, it's updated today. Where's my expectation? For example, when is the next time I will get the new, freshly updated data set for the topic of interest? And where's my guarantee that if I build that into my process, for example, and I leverage this data, that it's going to be available there tomorrow, right? So that really created the necessity of creating a marketplace for people who vet out data, right, of certain types, and they aggregate those data sets and maintain them and create APIs to make sure other users of this data, the potential users, can tap into it and extract it in an efficient manner. But then you have to pay for it. And that cost benefit every time you have a new data set that you think might be useful, right, becomes a bit of a barrier also for exploration, because until you have it, you can't really prove whether it really helped your case or not.
So this mindful approach, or continued mindful approach, suggests to me that it's contributed to the evolution of how data is used, or at least I think about all the positions that have come about in the last 5 years as a result of more data being used and more data being used in different areas. I think of machine learning engineers. It's a relatively new area of data. And then visualization engineers, AI engineers, obviously part of ML, but also NLP as well. Having this mindful approach with us able to cut down every area of data it is the direction we're going in.
Yeah, it's I think it's very there are lots of positions and very different talent sets that you need to address the right, who is going to procure the data, right? Who is going to get it out of where it sits programmatically and create that pipeline to give it to someone who can make use of it in an elegant form, right? Which is your pipelining, process. But then you have also consumers of the data streams that can model with those inputs, or create machine learning models where you can augment and create a better reality while using those data sources appropriately. And then ultimately you have that storyteller, right, that takes the output of a model and then connects it to someone who will consume the data and make some decisions off of that. And that's a skill set of its own, because then you have to know who you're talking to, know how savvy they are in interpretation, and how complex you need to make the graphs and plots and stuff that really explain what's going on.
And that's another role, connecting the data that's pulled, analyzed, cleaned, translated, connecting that with consumers, someone that can actually speak the language, be relatable to the consumers that need this data. It's endless, fascinating. Alla, in the interest of time, I would like to move on to our final and not insignificant question, and that's around advice for the data community, and particularly with your area of expertise being on big data. What piece of advice could you give to data professionals and users of data relating to big data?
Career-wise, I think knowing your customer is very important, right? And as we kind of touched on the last mile of the storyteller, each position, right, and each skillful member of the data analytics team, right, or someone who touches the data in various ways, has its own internal customer in that chain, but also an external customer of what is this effort supporting, right? And this could be your C-suite CXO leader that ultimately gets the results of the work, right? Or it could be a certain function that you are supporting, right? But trying to connect your activity to that higher level of what is the goal that you're trying to achieve and support, helps really focus you're on the right things. And in the craft itself, I think that same mindfulness is also something that helps you spend time on the right things. Because, for example, if you take a forecasting topic, right, not every single product service that you sell may have a good forecast. And so kind of even if you deploy the best model in the world, there would be some tail that would not be covered by that methodology, right? So creating ways to segment your work in this 80-20 rule of the, maybe, what is my low-hanging fruit? What should I be covering? And what is the need to cover for the need for the goal that I'm supporting? And what is the tail that maybe needs to wait for a different day, right? That really helped. A lot of times when I looked at or I supported the team growth in the analytics, the team members would get a little bit thrown off by someone requesting something specific, very specific, and not understanding that, well, this person maybe didn't really want 100% quality result or granularity, 100% accuracy in the answer that they're looking for, but really they wanted to make a decision: do I go right or do I go left? And for that answer to be generated, you don't really need to spend weeks and weeks to make all the data perfect fit into that answer. So understanding where that balance, where to find that balance of how much quality and uncertainty your work should cover for, and what it's going to be used for, is going to bring a lot of sanity to your day-to-day.
Okay, I've taken some notes. So ultimately, it's about knowing your customer, and you would presumably advise team leaders and managers to instill that idea in their data analytics teams, and for the individual contributors to be thinking about always connecting their activity with the higher goal of the business, and taking that mindful approach in doing so. Very, very insightful today. Thanks for that, Alla. And a new area of data, particularly with supply chain for me as well. So thanks for letting us get inside your brain for a moment. If people have questions and comments and feedback, I would ask them to hassle me first, but also
my gatekeeper.
Yes. It's usually us that comes up against the gatekeepers, but yeah, certainly happy to do so. We will be releasing this on numerous platforms, but also promoting it through LinkedIn. So it's a good place for people to socialize and comment on the topics today. So let's hope they do so and address it when it comes. Awesome.
You can find me on LinkedIn, and I always welcome new friends and people who are passionate in the area that I focus on. I'm happy to share my experiences as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great stuff. I'm sure the German data community would appreciate that, and I know that your work at ThroughPut is international as well. So, yeah, questions will come, I'm sure. All right, well, we'll leave it there for today, and yeah, I'll say I look forward to next time, Alla.
Me too. Thank you so much.